Hello and welcome back to the Kratom Sobriety podcast. My name is Nolan. I am here with Lily, and we are opening for episode 188 of the podcast today. Lily, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you, Nolan?
I'm actually pretty good. Got back from a snowboarding trip. 5 days of snowboarding is too much, but I bought a season pass and I got the season pass fever. I feel like I have to get as much use out of it as possible, and it stopped being fun. So
And
that's
don't you
how it's
actually
going.
have a real fever right now? Aren't you also sick?
I do. Yeah. Fever
Thank you.
2 ways. Yeah, it's like a Michelin restaurant, a bad dish at a Michelin restaurant.
Oh,
No, I know. But Lily and I had something we wanted to talk about today. And we were discussing how long we felt we needed to be, quote unquote, actively sober versus when we became, quote unquote, passively sober, or if we still are. So, just to quickly define those two things, active sobriety is when you are purposefully making an effort to avoid substances, kratom in this instance. You are either attending meetings, you are listening to podcasts, you're making a conscious effort in your day-to-day life to avoid the substance. And I define passive sobriety as a point way down the line in your quitting experience when you no longer think about the drug, it doesn't have any control over you, and you don't feel any need to either engage with the community to help yourself quit or otherwise. So we just wanted to talk a bit about that today. So Lily, if you have any thoughts.
yeah. And I feel like the active sobriety thing, that could technically go on for life. I think
Yeah,
that
definitely.
I think that the active sobriety period might not be, it might be a short period, but for a lot of people, it is a long period, or maybe it is a lifelong practice of continuing to engage with healing groups, to read about it, to learn about it, to speak with other like-minded people, to keep that in your mind. And part of why we brought this up was because as a group of people sober from kratom, even us on the volunteer team, we go in and out of wanting to be more involved and do lots of things and talk about it all the time. And then we go into other stages like, you know what? Like, I need a break from talking about this. I need to think about other things. I need to not be obsessed with my own sobriety. And then we go back. So, yeah, we wanted to start the conversation of that's okay and that's normal and there's phases and talk about the phases.
Absolutely. And this is my first opener, and heckin', who knows, 4 or 5 months, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
And I'd considered that two things: a bad sign, obviously, for you listeners, because I'm so amazing, but a really good sign, actually, because I've felt more comfortably sober than I have at any other point throughout my life. But to what you were saying about the stages, Lily, I think that the first couple of months of almost anyone's quit, if you've been addicted, is always very active. And that means every day either going on forums, trying to comfort yourself, really stepping into self work. And that's something that I really recommend. Step into it, be as active as you possibly can, not just so that you quit the drug, but so that you can remember who you were before you started using and just work towards being a better person. And then the last thing I'll say on that note is that I think something you brought up or something like it was kind of struck a chord with me, which is that we never really become passively sober, or we ought not to, simply because the act of becoming sober comes with a lot of other things. So when I became sober, I not only decided to quit a drug, but I also thought, I'm going to get back into my hobbies. I'm going to start connecting with the people around me. I'm going to start building a healthier place in my mind. And I think those kinds of activities should continue on past when you feel you're not addicted to the drug anymore, as just a defiant act or just a self-betterment routine.
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of the things that we do to stay sober aren't actually even related to sobriety. They just, yeah, like you said, they come with it. Like maybe when you were using, you weren't doing those hobbies. And so while you don't relate doing arts and crafts to not being sober, maybe you're doing more arts and crafts because you have sobriety. And if you stop doing that, like that's a little tiny piece of your healing patchwork that goes away. And yeah, we need all those little things. And back to that, that's why it's okay to take breaks from going into the active learning about sobriety and interacting about it. Maybe you focus on the arts and crafts a little bit more.
Maybe you do. You learn
Yeah.
to cook.
Yeah. And sometimes, so I am a very active dreamer. I have very vivid dreams. I am straight up like living in an alternate universe when I'm dreaming. It feels very real. And I've actually had a lot of using dreams lately that creeps me out. One of them recently, I was messaging the podcast group chat about, I don't know if you remember this, Nolan, but I had a dream that I was just going to bake a cake with a cup of kratom powder.
I see.
And I was like, what the hell is this?
What am I doing?
Gross.
Whoa.
Like chocolate kratom cake, just throwing
Nasty.
a cup of powder. I'm like, ah. So, yeah. And so the reason why I bring that up.
That's disgusting.
The reason why I bring it up is because subconsciously I'm thinking about it and something's going on that's bringing back up a trigger or a subliminal message about something. And it means, okay, maybe I need to take a step back. Am I getting stressed out? Is something coming up that's bothering me and I'm not paying attention close enough? And then these weird dreams are happening. For me, I like to connect the dots. And I think that sometimes it speaks to stress that I haven't realized yet. But yeah, having the using dreams will put me right back into that place of, okay, should I go to another meeting? Do I need to get a little more involved in my sobriety this week? Maybe I do. So.
Yeah, I think I remember that text coming through. And I just kind of went, wow. If you want to hate both cake and kratom, quitters out there, just a quick tip is put kratom in your cake. That's a surefire way to hate them both for the rest of your life.
Yep.
But
you'll quit in no time. That sounds great.
Yes. You don't find it in many books. There's not a lot of research about it in literature, but you heard it here first.
Cooking with kratom. No thanks.
Cooking with kratom and quitting kratom. An anthology. Yeah.
Immediate quitting after eating the cake.
Yeah, Martha Stewart. She's endorsing it. I've heard. Yeah, I've heard.
I love Martha
Snoop Dogg.
She's my hero, Martha Stewart. She is. She's
a wonderful.
Do you remember when she was in jail?
I remember the whole insider trading thing.
So I was her biggest fan, and I bought a T-shirt that said "Free
After
Martha."
The insider trading?
While she was in jail, and it was a T-shirt. It said "Free Martha" with a little picture of her in jail.
That's amazing. If I could find one of those T-shirts now, I'd unironically wear that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, Martha Stewart aside, I just really quickly before we cap this all off. Yeah, it seems like you have a very active subconscious. And I think that kratom really does find its way very deep within our subconscious. Even after we've quit, it was such a big part of our lives. There was such a fear, reward, risk cycle associated with it that it really does take root and it really does hold on to you. So I think it's really neat that you didn't just have that dream and think, oh, it looks like I'm baking with kratom. It was more of, oh, maybe this is a sign that I should look into this a little bit more and be a bit of more of an active participant in my quitting.
Yeah, I think it's just little reminders like that of, okay, do I need to engage more in my sobriety right now? Or do I need to step back and it's all that I'm thinking about? And this is becoming all encompassing doing all this sobriety work. Yes, it's okay to take a break. You don't have to do the hard sobriety work every single day. If that seems like a chore and it's getting to you, like maybe take a look at that, go for a walk without the podcast for a day. It's okay to take breaks because sometimes you come back to it stronger because you're like, all right, I'm ready to take in more information. There's time to take in information and then there's time to process. And sometimes you need to process before you learn more.
Exactly. Right? I don't just use a calculator and then do nothing with the results. It's the last thing I'll say is that, at least for me, I think many quitters around the world can probably, to some degree, resonate with this. I am definitely in a very comfortable spot, and I'm only saying this as a reassurance to those that are quitting out there. Quitting and sobriety at a certain point becomes less like a fight than it does become a period of acceptance and well-being. And that's obviously the goal. You don't want to have sobriety feel like work for the rest of your life. I know that at least for some people, whether the drug is a bit more severe, it can be. But I notice with Kratom and just reading stories and listening to these user accounts is after a certain period of time, you can look forward to some of that passivity. You can relax. It's not every single day you're worried about using again. Every single day, it's on the forefront of your mind. And I think that's at least part what we should all strive for.
I agree. I agree with that. And I'm 3 years off of it at this point, which is nuts. But even now, like while it's not on my mind every day anymore like it was, even now I will have those like flickers of a what if craving or a what if moment. It's almost, I think there's a term for this, was when you're like driving on a bridge and you're like, what if I just drove off? And it's that like flash of a thought briefly. And you're like, I don't want to drive off the bridge, but it's that weird
Intrusive.
thing.
Yeah.
So yes, intrusive thought. So I will have that still with Kratom every once in a while. And I just want to say that out loud because that might be part of your story too. It doesn't mean you're like going downhill or whatever. But again, just taking stock and noticing, like, am I having these flat subconscious cravings more now? What does that mean? Do
Definitely.
I need to up my game? Or is this just something to be aware of that is, oh yeah, this is your history reminding you you were there. Just remember that. So
it happened. And now we're baking cake with Kratom in it.
no.
No, we are not. That is not advice.
Kratom free baking only, please.
Yes. Let's create a Kratom free cookbook.
Yes.
I think that'll go over very well.
Oh God.
Great. Lily, that was great. I don't know, but it was great chatting with you. And can't wait to get some more of these in the books. But have a lovely evening to the listeners out there. Stay Kratom free. Good luck. And look forward to the interview coming up here in a second.
Yeah. Enjoy. Bye.
Welcome to the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. This is Charlie, and this week we have an interview with Wayne. Welcome to the podcast.
How you doing, Charlie? Glad I'm here.
And thank you so much. Why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Well, my name is Wayne. I'm in my late 40s. I'm from the Southeast Texas area, born and raised. I've been married for going on 30 years. I had the same job for about 30 years. 2 children, both adults, pretty stable as far as all that goes. I'm an avid weightlifter, big into fitness. That's about it when it comes to that.
Thanks. And what do you do these days to have fun or relax?
Other than, like I said, training with weights, that's a big part of my life. Really, me and the wife just like to sit on the patio, watch television, chill out, watch some Netflix shows, things that we enjoy, things like that. Nothing major, nothing too exciting.
And late 40s, you consider yourself a Gen Xer?
Yeah, according to the birth date, I would be Gen X.
Okay. All right. Well, what is your Kratom quit date?
My Kratom quit date is December the 12th of 2025.
How are things going these days with your sobriety journey?
Things are going really, really well. Really good for me, actually. A lot better than I've had several quit dates prior to this date. This is the longest period of total sobriety, and I'm totally sober, so I'm abstinent from everything, not just Kratom. But yeah, things are going really well for me right now.
Why don't you tell us the first time you took Kratom? How was it introduced into your life?
So, introductory wise, I can't remember how I came across Kratom. It was sometime in 2024. I want to say I saw it on a YouTube video or something like that. And make no mistake about it, I was looking for a drug. I have opiate experience in the past, so that's what I was. I wasn't looking for an herb or I was looking
Mhm.
for drugs. And that's how I heard about it. The powder seemed way too inconvenient. So I really didn't want to mess with the powder. So the first thing that I tried was a couple of extract shots. And I didn't know really anything about kratom. And being that I had had opiate, experience in the past, I thought it was a joke. I was like, yeah, this is really not going to do anything. So like my first experience was like a $30 extract shot. And I pounded the whole thing. And initially, I hated it. It made me feel just weird. But knowing what I know now, I just took too much in the beginning. And I got all the negatives and none of the positives. And then shortly after that, I experimented with some extract pills. And once again, I took, I bought a pack of like 3 and took all 3. And same thing again, just felt really weird. And that was basically my introduction to it.
My first time with the extracts too, it was like, wow, this stuff is really legal, especially when I took one of the more potent extracts.
Right.
And I tried those pills too for a little bit, but I found after like any more than 3, my stomach got upset. So I switched to the shots pretty quickly after that.
Right. Right. And then so shortly after that, so like I said, I tried the extracts and the pills maybe handful of times, 4 or 5 times. And so I was going into one smoke shop that was very close to the house. And it's funny how you meet somebody that changes the whole trajectory of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in the smoke shop and was asking the clerk behind the counter a bunch of questions. It was a young kid. He didn't know anything about kratom. And he was basically like, look, man, this is what we got. What do you want? And so at that point, I'd kind of made a decision that, this is bunk. It's just what I thought it was going to be. It didn't do anything. So the kratom experiment in my mind was over. Well, there was a guy behind me who was waiting. And so I started to leave the shop and I had got a phone call. So I took this phone call outside of the smoke shop and the guy behind me, he comes out. And I was getting off the phone and he tells me, he says, hey, man, this is what you're looking for. And he had this little pack and there was 3 of these tan colored tablets in them. And I asked him, I said, what is it? Is it kratom? And he says, well, it's like kratom, but it's like kratom on steroids. And he tells me, he goes, I took 2 for the first time and I was nodding off. And I thought to myself, I said, you get out of here, man. I was like, I've taken a lot of opiates in the past. And he said, yeah, me too. And so, you know, my, my curiosity was aroused at that point. So I went back in the smoke shop and asked the guy behind there, hey, let me take a look at those. And this is in, the infancy of 7.0. At least where I live, there was only one brand available and they only sold them at one smoke shop. And believe me, I went into all of them to see. And so they were $40 for these 3 tablets. And at this time, I don't even think there was a milligram dosage on them, to be honest with you. It just said serving size was a half of a tablet. So, I was on my way to work. So I decided I better use a little bit of caution. So I split the pill in half and I took half of it. And I was expecting less than nothing, right? Chewed it up and drank it with a Starbucks coffee. And anything that I take orally hits me super fast. Like within 5 minutes, I'm feeling the effects. And within about 5 minutes, it hit like a nuclear bomb detonated in my opiate receptor is how I would describe it. It was like, I would say the equivalent of 40 to 50 milligrams of hydrocodone easily. And in my mind, I just thought, this is it. Like I found the answer.
And this 708, right?
Yeah, that was 7.0. Yes.
I think that I'm a little bit more opiate naive and had never had more than a couple of Vicodins at a time. Maybe that's why the extracts hit me a little bit more. But, this is the year of 708 at the podcast, and more of our guests are escalating to that pretty quickly. What can you tell us a little bit about your past history with substances?
So I've got a long history of, drug abuse. In my 20s, I had I wouldn't call it a severe addiction, but it was bad enough. I went to detox twice for benzos, for Xanax. Actually got clean and sober at 30 and through Alcoholics Anonymous. And I maintained a period of 3 years of complete sobriety. I was working a program, had a sponsor, was sponsoring people, doing the whole thing. And at about 33 years old, I kind of, did what we call going back out, right? And I went back out and really maintained a pretty normal life for several years, probably till my late 30s. And, would drink a little bit here and there. I would drink to excess on the weekends, but not during the week. And slowly but surely in my late 30s, I started, experimenting with opiates. I had a couple of ankle surgeries that I had opiates prescribed to me. So I got out of control on those. And, my wife confronted me about it. So I had to go cold turkey off I'd say about a 60 milligram a day hydrocodone habit a couple of times. And that was a walk in the park compared to getting off 7-0.
So prior to taking 708, right before that period, a couple of years ago, where were you head-wise in terms of recovery and abstinence? And
so, I wasn't in any type of recovery space at all. I was, basically drinking all the time. Well, I say all the time, I would have a couple beers during the week. I was drinking, in other words, experimenting with other drugs, opiates when I could get them, stuff like that. I had a prescription for Soma through my doctor and, would abuse those. She didn't know. I have disc problems in my back. So, I had a legitimate reason to have them, but, I was supposed to take one in the morning, one at night, and I would get home and take 3 or 4 at one time, So that's what was going on at that time. It was pretty much, abusing drugs basically whenever I could.
Got it. So, well, how did your 708 use escalate over time?
It'd be tough to call it an escalation, Charlie, to be honest with you. It was everyday use right out of the gate. Like I said, that first day when I took that half a tablet, I really didn't believe it. Like in my mind, I couldn't rectify how something that I bought over the counter could feel like this. So honestly, I didn't. It sounds crazy, but like it took me 3 days of use before I really said, wow, this is for real. And then when I really found out that it was for real was my prescription for Soma had come available for refill. And one night I took 2 of those with 3 Somas and the effect was identical to mixing them with an opiate. And that's when I really knew, oh, this is something really serious. This is not a joke. But it was everyday use. I would say in the beginning, I was probably doing about a pack a day, which was about $40. And then that probably escalated to getting up to 2 packs a day, probably shortly at a month's time. And eventually I was up to 3 packs a day. And like I said, there was no milligrams on this at the time. So I have no way of knowing what the milligram dosage was at that time. But I was taking anywhere between 9 and 12 of these a day, depending. So I had like $120 a day habit. It was insane.
Yeah, that adds up, $1,000 a week,
Yeah.
$1,000 a month. I'm not independently wealthy. So that
Yeah, me neither.
How long were you with this pattern, at 120 a day, maybe up to your first attempt to quit?
So I'm never going to make an attempt to stop on my own. It's always going to come from my wife, right? So anybody that's taken 7-0 knows it's a highly functional drug, right? People, they would have to be very close to you to know that you're on something. So, it doesn't impair you. And like when I take traditional opiates, they affect me like speed. They speed me up. So this did the same thing, probably even more so. That's one of the things that makes 7-0 very different is that it's almost like an amphetamine and an opiate mixed together. So this pattern went on for, man, I'm going to say at least 6 months, maybe a little bit longer, where I was taking that amount. And then it even got to the point where I knew that there was no way that you could take something that felt like this that wasn't going to have some sort of withdrawals, right?
Yeah.
But I just thought, well, the withdrawals can't possibly be that bad, right? It's on the counter. I've kicked hydrocodone before. How bad can this possibly be? So one day I stopped by the smoke shop where I can remember there was only one smoke shop that sold this stuff, and they were out. And so I went that whole day without it and immediately went into withdrawals and was like, oh man, this is worse than traditional, hydrocodone withdrawals. So yeah, what led me up to stopping was I was pretty functional for the most part, but I would go through these spurts where I would kind of just really lose control, and I would just kind of use sick days for work, and I'd miss 2 or 3 days at a time. And I basically would just shut up in the room and just stay intoxicated. And it was during one of these stints, and my wife came home early from work, and she came in the room and said, "Hey, what is going on?" And I think she knew something was going on, but I think she kind of just maybe looked the other way because I really wasn't doing anything. I wasn't doing anything wrong per se. I wasn't staying out all night or nothing like that. I'd get up in the morning and cook breakfast, wash the cars, go to the grocery store with all the normal stuff, right? And I would say during this time, I probably racked up about $9,000 on a credit card. And she went ballistic. I mean, ballistic. And so I knew I had a serious problem and I knew I had to stop. And so I told her I was going to stop. But what I did was, so I initially tried to stop. So this happened on a Friday whenever she came home and all this happened. So I decided, okay, I'm going to try to see if I can stop. So I made it all the way through Sunday and then all the way through Saturday, I'm sorry. And then Sunday morning comes and I'm withdrawing too bad. And so it was at this point that, and I'm going to stay kind of vague on this to kind of try to protect my employer, but I had a job opportunity through my job and I had got a different opportunity. I was making a lot of money and I had a company credit card available to me. And I made a horrible decision to use the company credit card to start putting 7OH on there to support my habit. And so I did that behind her back probably for another 45 days. And that's when I really started making an attempt to knew I was going to have to stop for real.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Losing work and then essentially committing fraud.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And how that weekend, how did the withdrawals going through abstaining?
So the withdrawals were like all the traditional opiate withdrawals, but knowing what I know now, it was so much worse because it's hitting on so many other receptors. So, it's all the normal stuff, sweats, body aches, running to the bathroom, restless legs, you can't sleep, your stomach's in knots, no appetite, all the traditional things.
Why don't you fast forward a little bit about your couple quit attempts and get to the point where you finally got to last December?
Okay. So like I said, I was using the company's credit card. Of course, once the statement hit, that came out and bad things happened, right? So lost my job, had to pay that money back that was put onto that card. And so after that, I, knew that I really had to get help and I couldn't stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I had to go to treatment. So I was like, okay, I need to go to treatment. So I start calling facilities. And like I said, remember, this is the infancy of 7.0. None of these facilities knew what this was, right? They had no idea. The only reference point I could give them was Kratom. And some of them said they detoxed Kratom and some of them said they didn't. The ones that said that, and I had done some research, so I knew that coming off of opiates, when you went into treatment, they were going to give you Suboxone. And there was no way I was going to go through these withdrawals. If I'm going to suffer, I'll suffer at home. I'm not going to go to a facility and suffer there. So I'm calling these treatment centers. And And, all of them are saying, well, we'll detox you for kratom, but we don't use Suboxone for that. We don't use Suboxone to detox people off kratom. We just don't do it. So I finally found one facility and said, great, I'll be there. So I think I got there on a Friday, gave me my dose of subs, and this place was a dump. I mean, it was horrible. It was like everybody that was there was court ordered or was trying to avoid jail. It was half the people were homeless there. You slept on like army cots, like 6 to a room that were like 2-inch rubber foam mattresses. The food was awful. I mean, it was. So I called my wife and I said, look, I can do 30 days somewhere, but I can't do it here. I can't do it here. And she asked me, she said, well, are you safe? And I said, I don't know, 50-50. I was like, it's bad. So I knew I had to stay there long enough to get through the withdrawals. So I took subs for 3 days while I was there. And then I think it was on the 4th day, she called me or I called her and she said, hey, I've already talked to them. You're going to AMA out of there. I'm going to take you to another facility that I found and you're going to stay there for 30 days. So they didn't even fight me there. I think they kind of knew that I was in the wrong place. Normally when you AMA out of a treatment, they make you wait 4 hours. They don't let you use a phone. They didn't do any of that. They pretty much knew, hey, this guy didn't know what he was signing up for. So let's just let him get out of here. So she picked me up, took me straight to the other treatment facility, and I stayed in treatment there for 30 days in residential.
And how was that program?
The program was great. It was a great place. They were on acreage. They had horses. The facility was actually like a giant house. So it didn't seem like you were in a hospital or anything like that. It seemed like you were staying at a friend's house is what it seemed like. Like I said, they had property, they had horses, they had a dog that actually lived there. So it was actually a cool place. But I'm not one of these people that enjoys being at treatment. A lot of these people, man, they act like they're having the time of their life. And I've never been to jail or anything like that. So to me, I was having my freedom taken away. So I hated it. Being treated like a child, allowed to use the phone 1 time a day, 5 or 10 minutes, however long it was. So to me, I needed to be there, but it was not a pleasant experience for me.
And when was this?
This was in 2024.
Okay, so you had some time between that and your final quit date.
Yeah, plenty of time. So yeah, there's a lot more that goes on after that.
Okay.
So I get out of treatment, and so I would say I stayed. So me and my wife had the discussion, what's this going to look like when you get out of here? Are you drinking anymore? And I had pretty much made the decision, I'm not going to do anything anymore, right? No drinking, no nothing. So I get out, and I would say I might have made it maybe 30 days completely abstinent from anything, but I'm miserable. I'm just miserable. I hate life. And so, I would sneak a beer here and there and, did that. So that went on probably, I would say, for about 3 to 4 months. And I didn't touch any kratom of any kind. And then slowly but surely, the thought crept back in my head, I'll never do 7-0 again, but maybe I could try an extract shot. Maybe I could do an extract shot. That's, I didn't never had a problem with those. So let me try that. So that's what I did. I went into a gas station and bought just a cheap little $10 shot up there by the 5 Hour Energies. And, and my tolerance had been wiped out because I hadn't taken anything in months. So initially it was great. I'd get high off of it and it wasn't like a big deal in the beginning, and I maintained like that for quite a while. I would do a shot here or there, maybe twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. Nothing got too out of hand. But then, of course, the day always comes where you cross the line that you said that you wouldn't cross. And that's what I did. So what really screwed me, what screwed me is me. I don't like to dodge responsibility. So I went into a gas station and the guy selling 7-0 tablets in the gas station. And they were 2 tablets for $20. And I was like, wow, this stuff's gotten a lot cheaper, So I went ahead and bought a pack, like an idiot, and told myself what we always tell ourselves, it's just going to be this one time. And of course it wasn't. I took those and it slowly started to escalate up from there, from once a week to twice a week, 3 times a week. And then it just slowly started bumping up to the point where I finally went back to the smoke shops again. And when I walked back into the smoke shop after, this had probably been a year's time had passed since I had left treatment. And I walk into the smoke shop and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, man, there's like 30 different brands of this stuff now. It's everywhere. There's all different strengths. The milligram dosages are on there. And so I start experimenting. I'm buying this brand, buying that brand. And just slowly but surely, it escalated up to out of control where I was doing 300 milligrams a day. And that went on like that for quite a while. And once again, I'm never going to stop on my own. So my wife interjects again and says, hey, look, you're out of control again. You need help. You couldn't stop on your own before. What are you going to do? And so I said, well, I guess I don't have a choice. I'll just have to go back to treatment again. As much as I didn't want to, I knew that's what I was going to have to do. So I made the decision to call the treatment center I was at last time, which was, a humbling experience to say the least, to have to go back. And all the people that worked there, they all remembered me because I had been there just recently. And anybody that's been to treatment, that's not out of the ordinary. There's a lot of people who are coming through. There are a lot of retreads, but, you don't want to be that person. So I go back to treatment again. And this time I couldn't stay for the full 30. I told them I can do 21 days. So that's what I did. I did 21 days in residential minus my detox. Get out, and I might have stayed clean for 2 weeks. Get out, 2 weeks passes by, going to the gas station. There's the 7-0 tabs by the register. I have a slip. I tell my wife immediately at this point, I'm not trying to hide it anymore. I said, look, I had a slip. Okay, it won't happen again. So that, of course, wasn't just a slip. So I made it one more week clean, and then it was right back to everyday use, 300 milligrams plus a day for the next, I don't know, probably month. And then I made several attempts to try to taper, which was a disaster. I like to say that my intentions were honest, but I don't know if they really were or not. I was able to taper down until I got to the point where I was really going to have to start seriously stopping, right? So I'd be able to taper down to about 40 milligrams or 20 milligrams. And then after that, I would give in and just, boom, going right back to 300 milligrams a day. So the tapering was not working. My wife at this point was really fed up. She had she was on the edge of the edge, right? I was really close to pretty much, I knew I was going to lose everything if I didn't get a handle on this. And at this point, I didn't know what to do. I had been also during this time, I had went back to AA. I got a sponsor and he had started taking me through the steps, but I could never get past step 1 because I'm slipping all the time. So in my mind, I'm like, man, what am I going to do? Like, and for the first time, Charlie, in my life, don't get me wrong, I was always afraid of relapse. But for the first time in my life, I felt real despair because I knew I could not stop. I couldn't stop. And that was scary. It was really scary. I didn't know what I was going to do. So when I was in treatment that second time, my counselor had mentioned to me medicated assistance treatment. And she said, we don't endorse Suboxone medicated assistant treatment here. They did do the opiate blockers there. But she said, I'm just going over your past history and everything that you told me. You're not just dealing with the one-time 7-0, oh, I made a mistake and got strung out on 7-0. She's like, you got a lifetime of substance abuse issues. So she said, while we don't endorse it here, she said, I think I would not be doing you a service if I didn't tell you to maybe look into it when you get out of here. It wasn't something I was open to at the time. So But I was desperate, man. I was desperate. I knew that I wasn't going to make it. And my wife I could see it in her eyes and I could hear it in her voice. She had made peace with the fact that there was nothing she could do for me. Right. You know, she didn't do anything. There's nothing that she did and there's nothing that she didn't do. Right. So I knew that it was on the edge of everything just going away. So I got on the phone, started calling some places, and then I found basically like an online IOP program kind of, and they do a Suboxone treatment there through telehealth. And I said, man, I'm going to give this a try. You know, I've tried it every other way. You know, I really didn't want to do it, but like I said, I was desperate. So they prescribed me the subs and picked them up on that Thursday. And the quit date of the 12th was on a Friday. So I took my last dose of 7-0 at 6 a.m. that Friday. Went into work, and by 5 o'clock that evening, I was in full-blown withdrawals, right? Anybody that's come off 7-0 know the withdrawals kick in fast, right?
Yeah.
So I was in full-blown withdrawals. They had given me some comfort meds that I was taking, you know, clonidine and stuff like that to make it. And I knew there was relief in sight. I just had to wait 24 hours to do the induction. So Saturday morning, I might have slept 2 or 3 hours. I'm up and down, restless, watching the clock. Finally, it gets close enough. It's 5 a.m. It's not 24 hours, but I know I'm not going to go into precipitated withdrawal. So I'm like, man, just let me get this sub in me and I'm going to be okay. So I cut one of the films in half and I took 4 milligrams and boom, everything was gone. Luckily for me, I'm not one of these people. Like I was in treatment with people who were, on Suboxone and they were still struggling. They were coming off 7-0 and on high doses of it too, like taking like 8, 12 milligrams subs, and they were still in withdrawals. So luckily for me, I didn't have that problem. It took it away from me totally. So I started the subs that day, and then I was kind of on the fence of whether or not I was going to stay on it for the maintenance program. Because of course, you go on Reddit and you read all the horror stories, right?
Yeah.
So I'm getting nervous about this, and I really don't know what to expect. So I just decide, look, I'm just going to probably take it for a week, and then I'm probably going to stop it. So because of everything I had read said you could probably do Suboxone for about 5 days and maybe not experience too much withdrawal. So that's kind of what I thought I was going to do. So this was on a Saturday when I began. Sunday, stay at the same dose of Suboxone. Monday, I take 4 milligrams only. And so I just stayed at 4 milligrams from that point forward. So by Tuesday, I'm feeling kind of down, kind of depressed, no physical withdrawals, but I don't feel the best. So Wednesday rolls around. I'm still kind of feeling that way. And now I'm starting to really second guess this decision. I'm thinking, this doesn't really seem to be doing what I thought it was going to do. Thursday comes around and I start to have a turnaround. I start to feel a lot better. Now, Friday is probably, and I don't mean to sound overly dramatic, but Friday is like the day that changed my life. I got up Friday morning and I went to the gym like I normally do. And it just dawned on me that for the first time since I was like 18 years old, I was comfortable in my own skin and I didn't feel like I needed to change the way I felt, but I wasn't high. And that was like being born again to me. It was like a miracle. I couldn't believe it. And so I didn't expect that to continue, to be honest with you. But to this day, it's been working for me. And I know it's a hot button issue, especially in the recovery community with being on MAT. And look, man, I look at it like this. If you're somebody who's never, ever tried to stop opiates specifically, you should try on your own, through a 12-step program first. Do that first. But if you're somebody like me who's been to treatment twice and you going to AA and you're relapsing and your life's falling apart and you're going to burn it to the ground, man, give it a try because it's better than the alternative, man. It's better than the alternative. My life's better today. I would tell people this. Any of these people that I see that criticize it and, say you're not really sober and this and that, what I would tell these people, I would say, look, let me let you sit down with my wife. And if you can convince her that I'm better off without this than with it, then I'll get off of it. But good luck with that because she's seen the change from me being on the medicated assistance treatment. So that's how I came to full sobriety.
Great. Yeah. And that despair that you felt is real. And I could hear it. 2 residential treatments. And with your history, it does seem like the other way they call it is medication for opioid use disorder is appropriate. And people do have honest, bad experiences with MAT or MOUD. You can get out despair if you start using the 7-0 and the
Yes.
subs at the same time. And then you feel really like there's no hope
Right.
then. But many people can be success stories and interrupt that horrible cycle that you were in and stabilize and, just the stopping the $120 spending a day, it can be life changing itself,
Yes.
I mean,
Very
people will
much.
probably argue, well, wait until you try to get off the subs. And there's some truth to that. There's different things you can do. You can try the injection to get off of it. You can, and then some people, it's long-term use of subs. That's even more of a hot button issue, but it's a case by case thing that you should work with your doctor about,
Right. I'm just barely past 60 days sober, to be honest with you, Charlie.
Yep.
I worry about today. Right.
That stay in today. And so a couple of questions made me think, I just seeing you, folks won't be able to see you, but you are a pretty fit guy. So and this is a little bit off script, what do you think is the difference between somebody that you must have some discipline to do some body lifting, the weights, and it looks like you take care of your body versus this other like opposite of that, destroying it with this loss of discipline?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I do have a lot of discipline in a lot of other areas, right? When it comes to fitness, I'm very disciplined with that. I don't have to be at work till, much later in the afternoon. And I get up at 7 a.m. every day and hit the gym, and go to work every day. And for the most part, I've been pretty successful and I've been really disciplined. But it's just when it comes to drugs or any type of substances like that, once I introduced that into my body, but honestly, even when I was strung out on 7-0, I still went to the gym every day. If anything, and I don't mean to look, here's the deal. If drugs didn't work, we wouldn't use them, right? So if there was no positive to them in the beginning, if the first time I took 7-0, I was like, man, this is horrible, I would never have done it again. But, of course, in the beginning, it's great, right? And it's not until you start to get the consequences that it becomes bad. But yeah, it is interesting. I'm a paradox in that way. I do have a lot of discipline when it comes to a lot of different things. But when it comes to drugs specifically, I have no discipline. If you give me an inch, I'm going to take a mile.
And the other big debate, I mean, I think, especially with Kratom, but I think all drug use cultures have this a little bit. Can you just learn to use it right? Take tolerance breaks and moderation and, hopefully we're creating a space here where like abstinence from this stuff is the best solution.
I feel like, are there people out there that could take kratom powder or extracts or even 7-0? Like, people might find this as a surprise, even for something that almost ruined my life. I don't think banning it is necessarily the answer because, to be honest with you, I watch a lot of people's YouTube channels trying to come off this stuff, and they just seem to have it in their head that if it just gets banned, all my problems will be solved. And I'm like, dude, no, because the problem is you. The problem's in me. The problem's not sitting on my smoke shop shelf, right? That's just my solution. So if you take that solution away, I'm just going to find another solution. That's all I'm going to do. So I don't necessarily think that's the way to go. Do I think there's people out there that can do it like that? Yes. My wife's probably one of them. She would probably like the effects of, a kratom tea or something like that. But she's one of these people that could take it or leave it. She could have one on a Friday night. And if she never had one ever again, she's fine with that. She's the type of person that could, have a hydrocodone prescription sitting around and never touch it. And in my mind, I'm like, why aren't you eating those? But that's just the way my mind works because I'm sick.
Well, what's the good stuff that's happening in your life now, 60 days out?
The good stuff that's happening is pretty much, everything's kind of turned around really fast. Outside of my drugs, my marriage has always been great. So, once I remove that out of the equation and I'm not miserable being sober, my relationship has improved, a whole lot. Things are getting back on track. Things are going good from that respect. Relationship with my children is good. That was never too damaged from this, but my older son did, probably had some issues from this, because he's a grown man, and having to see his father go through this is probably not something good. As a matter of fact, the second time that I went to treatment, he drove me. So, that's kind of a messed up thing to have to do, but that's the way the cards fell. But things are going great. Like I said, everything's good. And I don't really have anything to complain about. I see a therapist once a week. That's part of my recovery. I see a sobriety coach regularly through my online service that I use. The only downside to being on subs is that I would like to work a 12-step program, but they don't really consider you to be sober. And I'm not going to go in there and not tell my sponsor that I'm on Suboxone. So that's a tricky thing right there. So I don't know how I'm going to navigate that. But right now, like I said earlier, I just try to be happy with the day. And today's pretty good. So
any unexpected challenges or surprises in these first 60 days?
Not too much, man. Not too much. Like I said, the subs I don't have any cravings really, even on the low dose that I'm on. I'll get a fleeting thought about it, maybe here or there from time to time, but it's something that pops in my head and it's gone. So yeah, nothing really. Like I said, I haven't had any close calls of any kind, nothing like that. So I just knock on wood that it continues that way.
And how did you hear about the podcast, and how do you use the podcast to help with your recovery?
So I heard about the podcast. I was just going on to Spotify and I was just searching for, I wanted to listen to something in recovery based, but something that was kind of specific. You don't hear anybody talking about 7.0 on, any of these basically like other like podcasts or anything like that. So I just put in Kratom and this came up and I was like, oh, let me listen to this. And then initially I just listened to all of the 7.0 episodes, but then I slowly started listening to all of the episodes. And the ones that really blow my mind are the little blue bottle stories. Those are the ones that really, I do have a lot of sympathy for a lot of people who kind of got caught up in that, because you can tell some of these people's stories, they really weren't looking for anything like that. And they got caught by surprise because that bottle is very deceptive, the way that it's marketed. So I have a lot of sympathy for those people that got caught up in something they really didn't know what they were getting into. That's not my case. Not at all.
I agree with you with that. There is some mismarketing.
Right.
Well, do you have any observations about people who might be trying to quit and they might have fears or misconceptions about getting off 708 or Kratom?
Yeah. So I would say this, if you're stuck on 7.0, and especially if you're on high doses, don't get me wrong, the withdrawals are bad. They are bad. But it's never going to be as bad as what you pump it up in your head. It's always going to be worse in your mind. It is going to be bad. Don't get me wrong. It's not going to be pleasant, but it's not going to be as bad as what you think. Right. So that would be, my piece of advice to people. If you're stuck on 7.0 and you hear this all the time, people saying, well, it's not the right time. Look, it's never going to be the right time. The longer you wait, the worse it's going to get. So just stop now. And if you got to go to treatment, go to treatment. There's so many options available, through online services and things like that. Like I said, and if you're somebody who has tried this multiple times and you can't stay sober, you might want to look into the medicated assistance treatment. It's the nuclear option, in my opinion, but that might be something that you need to look into.
And do you see a light at the end of the tunnel with the financial problems that you had from it?
Well, luckily for me, I was making enough money that I was able to pay all that off. So yeah, I'm not in any financial distress at the moment from it. But a lot of money was wasted. A lot of money was crazy amounts. It makes me sick when I think about how much I spent.
I kind of skipped around with some of our prepared questions. Did I skip one of the questions that maybe would be some answers that you wanted to give and share with the audience?
I don't think so. Some of that might have been my fault, Charlie. I kind of went on a little rant there for a while.
Well, we want to have a conversation and not have each interview be a cookie cutter. So that's good too. We appreciate a little change of pace. Well, do you have any plans to travel in the coming year?
No immediate plans, but we do like to travel. So yeah, we're always up to going on a trip somewhere here or there. But no immediate plans in the future, no.
Do you have a wish destination for you and your wife?
Wish destination. I would probably like to go to, if I could go anywhere, I would want to go to Santorini Island. You know where that is?
Where's that?
It's an island off the coast of Greece. It's where they have the white structures with the bright blue top buildings. If you look it up on Google, it's amazing. Like the water's like purple.
I'm glad to see that your marriage has been long and you're still together. Any advice to maybe a partner who is listening and trying to have a loved one that's dealing with this?
Yes. Yeah. I'm glad you asked that question. My advice to somebody, if your partner is struggling, it's important to remember that your partner, they do love you. They love you. It's not something that you've done or haven't done. And it's not that they don't care about you. And another thing that, people say all the time, everything that comes out of an addict's mouth is a lie. That's not all the ways true, right? A lot of times the things that we say, we really believe them at the time. And then once we get into the withdrawals, it just overtakes us and we are in survival mode at that point. So yeah, my advice is that if somebody's struggling with this, it's not your fault. You haven't done anything. It's just important to remember they're sick and they're also making you sick too. So both people need to give people each one needs to give each other some grace.
That's solid advice. Any other tips or suggestions for somebody wanting to make the jump and to commit to quitting?
Do it now. Don't wait. The tapering thing for me from 7-0 never worked. Like I said, I tried it several times and I could taper down until I got down to serious business tapering where I was supposed to get to under 40 or 20 milligrams. And then it went off the rails after that. So my only advice would be do it today and whatever measures you have to do to stop, if that means going to treatment, if that means going to AA and getting a sponsor and working the steps, do what you got to do, but don't put it off because it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get any better. That's for sure.
Well, thanks a lot, Wayne. I really appreciate it. I'm really tempted to make a joke about welcome to another episode of the 708 Sobriety podcast because that's what we're evolving here, and that's just the state of the marketplace. And more of our listeners are struggling with this. So I appreciate you sharing.
Thanks for having me. Like I said, if anything, I hope that maybe people can, they can shed some light. It's a serious problem. It's a serious problem. And if you listen, more and more of the doctors now are kind of starting to come around that this might be a full agonist and not a partial. There's more data coming in saying that it looks more and more like this may not be a partial agonist after all. It could be a full-blown opiate.
Yeah, it's definitely mimicking it. And yeah, the feds have said 9 months ago and last summer that they were going to ban it, but it's going to end up be banned in most places, eventually.
Well, if it gets banned, though, what'll end up happening is the companies are going to change it by one molecule and just put it back out under another name. And it'll be this cat and mouse whack-a-mole game that goes on between the manufacturers and the feds. So I don't really foresee
Yeah,
that happening.
I was just in Florida and where it's been banned, and I stopped in a couple Kratom bars, which were interesting because they were a little bit more like coffee shops, but at the same time, they were like a bar because everybody in there knew each other.
Right. Yeah.
And they're great vibes. I got my laptop and got some work done, but I did stop at a vape shop and I asked the guy, what are people doing since 708 isn't on the shelf anymore? And he handed me a product that had 400 mgs of mint in it and and it was more of like a size of a pop can,
Mm-hmm.
and it had 2% 7OH, and
Mm.
it was like $40.
Yeah.
And so that was like that whack-a-mole that you were talking about. 400 grams of Michigani with 2% of 7OH is still packing a punch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially if somebody that's their first time. That's going to put them on the moon.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, before we say goodbye, any last parting words?
No, I just want to say thanks, man, for having me on. Like I said, hopefully somebody will hear this and maybe it'll help somebody. Hopefully that's the goal here. That's what we're trying to do. So I hope that somebody hears this, and if anybody does hear this, it would be hard to be worse than I was. I'm not saying that there's not anybody out there worse than me, but you would be hard pressed to find somebody who was more strung out on this than I was. And if I can get off of it, even through Matt, if you want to use that caveat, anybody can do it because I'm not Superman.
Yes, it's good. We appreciate having people from all walks of life, and this 2 rounds of residential treatment is serious. So, well, thanks a lot. It was great meeting you, and I'll edit all my mumbling at the end out.
All right, thanks for having me, Charlie.
Okay.